8 years have passed. I think even though 8 years have passed, things have not improved much in Rakhine, especially for the Rohingya community. And while almost like more than 7 lakh people were displaced initially, there are almost 1 million people right now in Bangladesh, and also in several countries of South Asia and Southeast Asia who live in protracted displacement situation. And the violence in Rakhine has not stopped. It continues. And things have only gotten dire, is getting more and more dire. And as of 21st August, also, we have reports of uh, like loss of connection, sort of confiscation of SIM cards from people in the community. And so they're losing touch with people outside. And I think this webinar is one of those attempts to address some of these important discussions. So thank you everyone for joining us here today. And before I get into much details, I think we have a report wherein we have documented some of the instances of violence that have occurred in Rakhine between November 2023 to August 2024. And I have my colleague and dear friend Dia, who's also an editor and a researcher at R4R, and also is currently working at the International Red Cross Federation, in Red Cross, Red Crescent. So I think over to you, Ria. I think she will provide a brief summary of the report, and from there on, we can begin the discussion on the issue.
Thank you so much, Samanvita. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So, as you all might know, that we all prepared a report, and I'm just going to provide a brief overview of what that is and the findings that we've had. But I would strongly encourage that you go through it yourself and find out. There's a lot of details that we have recorded that I can't summarize at this moment, but. Yeah, just to cut a long story short, I want to start by saying that this report was initiated in response to the atrocities that happened last year and are continuing, as Samanvita pointed out. And it has to be said that this work would not be possible without our volunteers on ground who gathered testimonies under very, very challenging and very, very unsafe conditions. And more so, we would also like to thank the people who were brave enough to give their testimonies, as we're hearing that SIM cards are getting confiscated and everything. It was generally unsafe for them to do this, and yet they're the only reason why this report is possible and this discussion is possible. So with that in mind, as we've recorded in our report, that with the Arakan Army seizing control of over 80% of the Rakhine State, including which obviously includes the Rohingya majority townships, it is important to understand the reality of lives on ground, since we do not often get to see that perspective in news, if anywhere else at all. So between November 2023 and August 2024, R4R found systematic human rights violations perpetrated. We found that the AA operations involved deliberate destruction of Rohingya villages through setting fires, arson, looting, forced displacement of thousands of people, which is only worsening the displacement and migration crisis. And as as is always the case in situations like these, sexual violence was also found to be very rampant, and sexual violence against all, especially women, also was a very common theme. And Rohingya women and girls were subjected to mass rapes and other forms of sexual abuse, which was often carried out in presence of another family member to instill fear and humiliation. And on the flip side, with regards to younger men, they are being kidnapped en masse by the AA and forcefully being conscripted to fight in their ranks. And many have been taken from their homes under the pretense of investigation or interrogation, only to be forced into servitude. They don't receive any payment. Their families do not know where they are, and they're often used as human shields, as in military operations. And this is basically like the first half of the report, like goes into detail about this, their first hand testimonies about this. The second section of the report examines in detail the Hoya Siri massacre of 2024, where 346 Rohingya men, women, and children were brutally killed the village was cordoned off and there was no avenue for people to escape. So survivors recounted indiscriminate shootings, targeted executions, burning of houses and bodies in a way that there was no evidence left of the massacre other than just the people who survived it somehow. And it has to be said that it will be remembered as one of the darkest chapters in the Rohingya history, and in the ongoing persecution. So, in total, this report is R for R's way of, our efforts to document the atrocities that are dying down in the conscience of the world, and there's no outrage against it anymore. But the survivor testimonies, eyewitness accounts, ground investigations are our way of keeping the Rohingya community alive in the conscience of the world so that we continue talking about it, and hopefully we see peace and change really soon. So yeah, that was a brief summary of our report, and back to you, Samanata.
Thank you so much, Ria. That was important. That was very succinct. Thank you. I think we'll now open the session to our speakers. Just some general rules and guidelines. I think we have about 90 minutes for the speakers. We have 9 speakers, so 10 minutes each, 8 to 10 minutes each, ideally. And then I think we should keep the floor open to questions. So we have 30 minutes for questions. I think if that's all right. In the meantime, if there is something that you would like to ask, you can always put it in the chat. We can pick it up. Yeah, so I think our first speaker is Hafsa Tamisuddin. For a fact, I know that I started reading about Hafsa when I started my doctoral research. She has always been a source of inspiration. She's from the community itself. Hafsa is also the co-secretary general of Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. She's a social worker, she's a human rights defender, and a Rohingya activist. They advocate for the right of refugees, LGBTQI communities, statelessness, gender equality, prevention and response to SGBV, and ending child marriages with more than 15 years of experience of working with refugee communities. They are also a member of the Global Movement of Statelessness, board member at Forces of Renewal Southeast Asia, and member of the board for the Azadi Project. Their expertise includes understanding of the ground realities of the challenges faced by refugees, people from the LGBTQI community, as well as someone with lived experience of post displacement. They're passionate advocate for the power shift, inclusion, and diversity within system. Their work and advocacy are centered on improved prevention and response measures to SGBV to promote and protect the rights of refugees, stateless people, asylum seekers, and LGBTQIQ plus communities in the Asia Pacific region and beyond. Over to Hafsa. I think you should set the scene and give some context about the nature of the crisis and also for how long it has been continuing. Thank you so much.
Now you reminded me that next time when I send my bio, just to send 3 sentences. Sorry about that. Too much of the time has been taken. Thank you. Even if you said I should set the scene on the nature of atrocities, I can see that my fellow panelists are spot on this as well. I thought I would just get an overview of the current displacement context because of the atrocity that have been committed in Arakan State, Myanmar, Burma, against the Rohingyas for many, many years now. It's not even years, it's decades. But of course, the attention was grabbed by the international communities only after 2012 and 17 and now. So because of the number of displacement of Rohingyas in the region and the population of Rohingya that are trapped inside the countryside, now we're looking at 1.3 million Rohingya approximately in Bangladesh, and looking at additional arrival of 1,500,000 between 2024 and now because of ongoing intensifying war inside Arakan State. And in Malaysia, we're looking at 1,500,000 Rohingya, and there is no refugee protection. India, I don't need to speak, there are a spot on India on the panel. Still looking at 40,000, and then Indonesia, approximately we're looking at 3,000 to 5,000 Rohingya displacement. The numbers are adding up. In Thailand, we don't have specific data, but there is also quite a good number of Rohingya, both in the detention and also in the community setting without any legal framework for protection. So the common thread in all these countries is that none of these countries have refugee policies. It means leaving Rohingyas to be even more vulnerable and risks to detention and forced deportation, not to mention. And there is Even the countries who have signed non-refoulement policy, they don't care. They're doing it. Now the situation of Myanmar inside. You mentioned there is the nature. The nature, you have also touched upon it from your report. The nature of this atrocity is often using sexual assault, and then all sort of atrocities as a weapon to threaten and instill fear in the heart of Rohingya people, and then making it absolutely vulnerable, either die in the country or take any possible rescue route to any countries that they could go. And the other trending natures of these atrocities is always using Rohingya for whatever political desire that the government has, and including Arakan armies now, and they are being debated. And I don't want to go so much in detail in that. So what does that leaves to Rohingya inside Arakan? From 2021 until we have 2.6 million people are internally displaced that we don't talk about. They are not also living in the great scenario, even if they're inside the country. Since 2023, 500,000 have been also forced to leave from their homes. And the junta, the number of the junta camping against Rohingya violence have killed about 4,000 civilians. So let alone in how many in 2023 is 1,300. So the Rohingya who are trapped inside the countries are also living in limbo without knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. This is the reality of Rohingya persecution against Rohingya inside the country, in different refugee hosting country, transit country, and also being the vulnerable in the hand of smugglers and human trafficking. So what does it leave to Rohingya? There is also a lot of regional implication in wherever Rohingyas are displaced now. For Bangladesh, there is a challenge of always attributing and bringing the attention is that we are bearing the impossible burden of Rohingya in a small country with these poverties, and also the issue of forcefully or willingly, according to Bangladesh government, relocation of Rohingya in Bachchan Char is another very concerning, serious human rights concern. In India, there is framing Rohingya as a security threat. You can speak more, Savarji and Ali, I will not go. And then there is an ongoing forced deportation that nobody is taking serious accountability against that non-refoulement and forced deportation. And then there was another implication also in Thailand, and on top of that, Rohingya in this region who are being displaced are also used against different countries in the region when things get difficult in their own country, crises like COVID-19. Because of that, this online camping against Rohingya, provoking the hate and xenophobia against Rohingya is becoming a trend. And even among the many other refugees from different other countries, Rohingyas are the least favorable among all the Rohingyas because of all this transitional repression, provoking this hate and xenophobia, using AI-generated online camping. That is also another additional vulnerability that Rohingya experience. So what does that leave? Many people and academic, NGO, INGO, Rohingya diaspora themselves have been working in this space for too long, many decades, to look at the sustainable solution and Rohingya being able to go back home, and particularly after 2017 August genocide. All this effort, and there are this different view on, many believe that the only solution for Rohingya is International Crime Court, ICC and ICJ. Some say, no, we need to look at the urgency of the now, that people are struggling to survive. Some say, no, we need repatriation. Some say it's, from my personal and also the perspective of Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network, from our view is that we do not believe that only one solution is the solution for Rohingya. We are not in the position, and we don't have the privilege to say we will only accept one solution. We have to take all the solution and plus think about the innovative solution to respond to the urgency of the now. When I say the urgency of the now, I'm also looking at the funding cut of US foreign aid in Bangladesh and in all other countries, and the urgency that's going to happen after December 2025. There is nothing left, and what's going to happen to this 1.3 million. And also looking at the medium term, when this ICC and holding junta accountable for the massive atrocities against Rohingya, the medium term is in preparation of the Rohingya community in wherever they are in the host country, capacity building and livelihood, access to education and all this stuff is also really important. And of course, repatriation. Many of you in the call on this panel, as well as others in the audience, might have heard about this high-level meeting happening in New York, looking at the repatriation of Rohingya as soon as possible. And then this high-level meeting happening in Cox's Bazar tomorrow and on Monday, there's also looking at the repatriation of Rohingya. So when we talk about this repatriation of Rohingya, it's really important to look into what kind of repatriation we are looking at and what kind of lesson learned we have learned from 1992 and what are the potential, and doing it in a manner that is safe for the Rohingya, and there is a mechanism in place prior to repatriation, during the repatriation, and upon repatriation. That we are also observing other emerging trends and concerning trends is that the Andaman Sea crisis. I've been in Bangkok a couple of days, having this closed-door meeting with different government representatives from Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, and in the region. Another emerging trend is as you may as well, all of you on the panel and also the audience are aware of, the security concern in the refugee camp and the ongoing intensifying war inside Arakan and Burma. It is compelling to the people in the camp and in Arakan to take the risky journey. The Andaman Sea crisis is also becoming another concern. So what is the response from all these countries? Is like Thailand, Indonesia, India, Malaysia. Their position on response to this boat crisis, as they call it, is not very favorable, because what we observe from our analysis is that they are more concerned about the smuggling and anti-human trafficking than saving the lives of the people. What they're so worried about is that as long as Rohingya does not ashore to our land, that's all matters. No countries in the region is interested in safe disembarkation. And the fact that there is no improved situation in terms of security in the region and in the refugee camp and in the country, there's also most likely that Rohingya will take this risky journey and or fell into the hand of the smuggling and be vulnerable towards human trafficking. And one other trend, because since 2017, now 8 years after genocide, because international communities and all the states and neighboring states, including ASEAN, have not come up with a sustainable and practical response to Rohingya crisis. The younger people, children and women in the refugee camps are losing hope. They're in a very desperate situation. They can't see anything. There is nothing happening. So that is when the community become very vulnerable. In a sense, they can be easily manipulated, fueled to use their anger, frustration, and pain to the wrong direction. So there is a lot of, you might have been as well observing Rohingya representation, leadership, who is doing what. And then there was a danger of, also this is the time when if government want to manipulate and use Rohingya for their own political interest and gain, this is the time, and it's very easy. If anyone, any government, any representation come to Rohingya, tell them that, look, after 8 years, no one is doing nothing. You have to take the matter in your hand. This is what you're telling. It's a very easy sell. So it is also very concerning to convince the people who are living in a very deteriorating situation in the refugee camp, going and telling them, look, we need to be doing more critical thinking before making harsh decisions. They will be like, you're not living in my situation. You don't understand my life. Why are you going to come and tell me about the accountability in ICC and the successful repatriation? I'm not listening. So it is really concerning for the Rohingya community right now. So to wrap up and also setting the scene, as you said, is really becoming very important times for the Rohingya response at this point to look into this high-level meeting happening, ICC, the emerging trends and security concern in the refugee camp, and then the way how Rohingyas is vulnerable by both junta and also Arakan Army inside the country, and the truth and reconciliation is very far away between Rohingya and Rakhine people. All of that needs to be looked at and think about critically, and there is a more than ever the need for coordination and collective leadership as a movement in this space. I'll leave it here, and so other panelists can come in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Afsa. That was very comprehensive and very needed. It sort of spoke about the past and the present, and of course the future, and how it's not looking too bright for the community. I think with that in mind, I think it's necessary. Of course, we've read about the crisis, but I think a first-hand testimony would be important at this juncture, and I think we have a genocide survivor from 2017. But Jamalida Begum is not just that. She's also a women's activist. And yesterday, when I was looking her up online, I think She has achieved some incredible feats in terms of how she's managed to build her life. And she did not send us her bio, but I think it's better to hear about her life and some of the incredible feats she's achieved from her itself. Jamalida Begum, over to you.
सॉरी सोनविता जी, जमालिजा की जो बात करेंगे ना, जानी ट्रांसलेशन करेंगे.
Thank you so much. Sure. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. So Jamalida will be speaking in Rohingya language. So whatever she will say, I will be here for her translation. So Jamalida, assalamu alaikum. Tuan tun zake su hua for el. In begulun tun Rohingya hata mada hone eka bari bari sata hoyo. Tun zake su hobe ain tararar mata English mada hoy da haim bujone. Bari sata hoba tuan zindi kenguru shuru hoye tun ki face go jode Barman made Arakan made in hoy bade. I think she is on mute.
तुम्हार
Her
आवाज
voice
खुलो,
is not
तुम्हार आवाज
coming.
खुली दो.
आवाज खुली बात है ना?
माइक उगवा से दुआ माइक करूँ तो गया करी दो तुम. माइक उगवा से माइक उगवा देखो ना माइक. माइक उगवा से दुआ माइक दोला या मदे all this सिद्धो.
She has to unmute herself.
बुबू तू फोन on है?
Amrit. Amrita,
No, I
can
can't
we-
unmute.
Okay, okay.
I've asked,
Ayo.
I've sent the request, but I can't unmute.
Sure, sure. Thank you. No worries. I think I can give it to you.
Obu apa saya ne? Obu তোমার বাইরে খুলিতে হয়, তোমার বাইরে আবাস খুলি দিতে হয়.
Maybe we can try from our side to unmute her if someone has that options.
তোমার মাইক গো আছে, তোমার মাইক গো লাল হইতে কে দে ইয়া মা সিদ্ধ মাইক গো ছ মাইক গো আছে দিলা তোমার ফটো মারি দি ফেড়াই.
जी जी
এ বস হবার
अस्सलाम वालेकुम
होय बालिका तू होना लगातार तू होना.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम आन नाम है जामालिदा बेगम आज जन्म है बर्मा माजे तो बर्मा माजे 2000 माने आरा शुरू तो डोरो इलेती आरा रोरे बिची जुलुमास्कार कल सोली तो इस जुलुमास्कार कल सोली 2017 माजे 2016 माजे आरा देखे मत कदा घटना यान माजे আর মানে 2016 সালের অক্টোবরের 9 তারিখের দিন ঘটনা কেন অক্টোবরের 11 তারিখের দিন মানে আর ফারাম মাদে মামলা কেন আর নেশাবুরু গোয়াঙ্গতুন মামলা কেন তো আর গোয়াঙ্গ হইলে নেশাবুরু মামলা কেন অনার পরে অক্টোবরের 11 তারিখের দিন 2টা বাজে আর জামা মারিও গুলি করে মারি ফেলাই গুলি করে মারি বাদে অক্টোবরের 12 তারিখ 13 তারিখ পর্যন্ত 14 তারিখ 15 তারিখ পর্যন্ত আর ফারাম মাঝে মিলিটারি গলি মক লয়রে মিলিটারি লে মিলিয়রে মানে আর নাশাফুরুর গয়ঙ্গম মাঝে পিয়ম্পাই হদে ফারাইয়া আনম মাঝে হাত গুজাওয়ারা হদে ফারাইয়া আনম মাঝে নিশ্চয় নাবুদ গরি গদুয়ার ফুরাদি ফেলাই এককান উদ্যান
বাড়ির সাথে হওয়া করিব তুমি তুনানি খয়নে তারপর বাদা বুঝাই দি বাদে তারপর বাদে আর মাতা হইয়া না বুঝজনে So, Assalamu alaikum to all. My name is Jamalida. I was born in Rakhine State, Myanmar. Since I was born in Myanmar, we face a lot of persecutions back in Myanmar. On October 9, we faced an unprecedented incidents because of which I actually had to flee from the country. It was on 11 October when my husband was shot dead, and continuously on 12th and 14, the military together with the mob extremist group, they were continuously burning our villages and our houses. লাগাতার হয়ে গেল।
তো এই যে তোমার যে জামাই মারি ফেলায় অক্টোবরের 16 তারিখের দিন এলার আর মায়া ভান ধরে মানে আর ফারাম মাঝে ফাজিয়া মেলা ভান গো দুয়ার পুরা দিবা দে গো বিড়া বাড়ি সাবলা হয় মিলিটারি গিয়ে আর বিড়া বাড়ি সাবলা হয় ওরা আর ফারাম মাঝে আসি আইনের পরে 16 তারিখের দিন অক্টোবরের 16 তারিখের দিন আর সব গুরি মিলিটারি বেকুন দলা গুরি আর 65 জন মেলা ভান ধরে বর্মা সরকারে বর্মার মিলিটারি লই যাই রে কি গজিল এক জায়গার মাঝে দলা করি হেন তো আর 500 মায়া ঘরে মানে দিলারে বকল গজিল আই নিজেরও জামালিদারের তো আর নিজের দো রেপ ভিত্তি মাইন দো তো আর 18 বছর মনে আছে দে মানে হেন্দিলা ক্লাস 3 মাদে ক্লাস 4 মাদে পড়ালেখা করে দে হেন্দিলা 50 জন মন ধরে মিলিটারি হেন্দিলা স্কুলের মাঝে গলায় তার বজ্জুতা লইলে রে বুঝি 16 তারিখের দিন তো ইয়ার পরে বলা মিলিটারি আরারে নিজে বাজে রেপ করি আরারে দিলে রিকিও দে টাইম মাঝে পাঁচা মানুষ দেখি ওরে দিলে আরারে কি গজিল পাঁচা মানুষ লই যাই ওরে ডাক্তার লই ওরে দেখা করি হেন্দিলা করি ওরে মানে ডাক্তার তো দাবা ওষুধ করি ওরা আরাম কাম হইলাম আরা তিন্ন মেলা ভরে বেশি মানে জুলুম গজিল হেন তুন দুয়া মেলা ভা মরি গিয়ে আল্লাহ আরে বাসাই আর বাসার উচিল আলে ওরা আর ওয়ান্ডার বাগরেও মারি ফেলাই বেশি দোয়া হার গজিল মানছে আল্লাহ বাসন না তো আর বাসাই বাসনের পরে বেলা আই দাবাই ওষুধ করি ওরা আরাম মিকা মহিলাম তো অক্টোবর নভেম্বরের মাঝে আর দেশের মাঝে গই মিসি আঙ্কিলি হয়ে ওরে ইউএন এর নামাইন্দা আর ফারাম মাঝে গই মিসি আঙ্কিলি হয়ে মায়া হওয়া গিল তো মায়া বহি বা জনের পরে আর এসব ঘটনা আর জামার ঘটনা আর দেশবাসীর ঘটনা আর কি করছিলাম মিসি আঙ্কেলিরা শেয়ার করছিলাম তো শেয়ার করানোর পরে মানে সেদিন ফারাম মাঝে থাকি ভাবছিলাম ইয়ান্তু
বাড়ি বাড়ি সাথে হইও না তাকে আয়ও বুঝাই দিয়ে গিয়া ঘুরে ফারি ফোন একটা বাড়ির সাথে ঘুরে হইও না
জি জি বুঝাই দেওয়ার না তলে অনেক হ্যালো ইয়ার পরে
মাঝে থাকো না আয়া গুতো নিম বুঝাই দিনে তারপর বাদে লাগাতার হইও না ইয়ান্তুল্লাহ বুঝো না
জি জি জি
So, when the military, together with the extremist mob on October, committed atrocities and violence in my village, Nashapara, on 16th of October, when they returned, we, along with some of our villagers, went back to our village to see what all they have done to our village. So when we went to the village, 25 of the Rohingya girls, including myself, we were gathered in a place where amongst 25 of the girls, 5 of us was picked and was taken to a separate place where 5 of us was raped. I myself was the victim of the rape at that time. So after the rape of the 3 girls, including myself, 2 of them passed away, and I was the only survived persons from there. So after that some of my community members came and they took me to the hospitals, and somehow I managed to survive. And it was on November when I got a chance to narrate my story when Miss Yangili, the UN reporters, came into the locations where I was staying. There I narrated my stories to her. Ya bala laga tari hantula ta hon.
toyela misi ankilize tamazi গিয়ে গয় মানে ইবি আরারো হদ দেখি তোমারা রাতে শুনো করিব তোমারা যার ফারাম মাঝে তেতে বাসা মারিয়রে থাকিত পারিবা এন হইরে আরা কি গইছি পুরা বিরাম মাঝে বাসা মারিয়রে থাকি তাকনের পরে নভেম্বর ডিসেম্বর মাঝে অক্টোবর নভেম্বর মাঝে ইবার পরে আরোগ্য উমিশু হইরে মানুষ গিয়ে মানে ওদের জাতিসংঘ তো গিয়ে দেরিয়া হে মানুষারিও মানে আর দেশের ঘটনা হইতে আর মা বোনেন রেপ খাইয়ে দেখি ইনর ঘটনা হইতে আর আত্মীয় স্বজন মারি ফেলাই দেখি ইনতে গড়বাড়ি ফুরা দিয়ে দেখি ইনতে আই বারে কি করছিলাম শেয়ার করানোর পরে এলা মানুষই বাইও ফুনিয়রে বেকিম ফুনি মানুষই বাইয়ে গিয়ে গইয়া জনের পরে আব্বাল্লা সত্তুন ওগো ডাক্তার উমিয়াই আর রেনালির কথা ডাক্তার উমিয়াই গিয়ে উমিয়াই যাবার যেদিন যাব সেদিন আর 3বার মিলিটারিয়ে ভাড়াতু লড়াই ইবার লো দলইম বলি লড়ানোর পরে এলা হদ আর কি করছি এবার মিলিটারিয়ে লড়াইলে এদিন 3 জাহালতু বুয়া মিলিটারি দরে যার মাঝে হালের মাঝে 3 বুয়া কি গইছে কি জাহালতু বাইরে মরে গিয়ে গই todo ara কি গইছি মিলিটারি ফিসে আয়র তো ফারাম মাঝে গলিয়রে থাকি তাকনের পরে এলা ডাক্তার রুমিয়াই ডারি আয়রে আর ফারাম মাঝে লাইমি লামনের পরে এলা কি গইছি
দূরতে আয়ো না ইয়াম বুঝাই দি তারপর বাদে হইয়া লাগাতা. So after I narrated the tortures and the brutality that I face, Miss Yangili told us that we will not face the same atrocities, and we are allowed to build the tents, and we can continuously stay there. So after she returns, we will continue to stay in that area. So after some times, another high representative came. His name was Umin Su. So I also narrated the tortures and atrocities I faced there. And also after some times, another person came. His name was Dr. Umia. So we wanted to narrate the same stories to him, but the military did not want us to share our stories, the atrocities that we face. So the military chased us 3 times so that we cannot come in front of that persons and can narrate the stories. So because of that, on that day when the military was chasing 3 of my villagers, they were youths. When they were running away from the military, they jumped into the sea where they died.
ইয়ার পরে বেলা ডাক্তার রুমিয়া যে তম্মাজা আসছে আই ওদি কি কইছি মানে ফারার গুয়া মানুষ শুদ্ধ দল হয় না ভারে মিলিটারি লা বলি মানে সেগান এন্দিলা 3 বাদ গগো মিলিটারি তাইকে হয়তো আমি মরে যাই বা জামা যাতন মরে গিয়ে আই যাত তেত্তর জামারে যাতন মারি ফেলাই আই যে তোর একটা জুলুমের শিকার বন্যি দুনিয়ায় আনার মধ্যে আঁতু বাঁচি থাকন না হন লাভ নাই আই যে দূর বুঝাই পারি আই যদি আজি তার যদি আর হতাগান আর মা বোনেন্দর হতাগান আর বাবা এন্দর হতাগান ইতারালো যদি আই যদি শেয়ার করি না ভারি দইতে গেলে দুনিয়ার মাঝে আর বিচার দেব আরা ন ভাই মারা তো মরি যাই বয়ং হয়রা হিম্মত করি আর কি করছি মিলিটারির ভিতরে যাইরে আর এসব ঘটনা দেশবাসীর ঘটনা আই কি করছিলাম ডাক্তার রুমিয়াই রে আই শেয়ার করছি শেয়ার করানোর পরে এলা দুটা
So because of the restrictions the military has imposed, we could not, none of the villagers can come in the front and could narrate the stories to Dr. Umya. So, but I thought that my husband was already killed. Nothing has left into my life. So I have to gather my courage and go into the front line and to narrate the things that we have suffered. So I gather my courage and I narrated what all we have experienced there. And yeah, তারপর বাদ হয় আর বাদ এইবারে বুঝাই বাদ
জি ইয়ার পরে বেলা ডাক্তার রুমিয়া ইরে যাচ্ছে তাই আর এ ঘটনা বেকিম বুঝাই বুঝানোর পরে এলা আর হতাইন আই বার্মি সমাজে তুরা তুরা হই ভাজি রোহিঙ্গা হতাম মাঝেও হই ভাজি এলা আর হতাই তারা নবুঝে দেহিন ওগো সুনামিয়া হদে পোয়া ইবে বুঝাই দেওয়ানোর পরে এলা আরা যার করম মাঝে তেতা আগি গই ডাক্তার রুমিয়া তারা এলা হেলিকপ্টারে আসি তারা গিয়ে গইয়া এলা মগরি ফর 5টা বাজে দে হে টাইম মাঝে মিলিটারি আর কি করতে আছে তুয়াই বল্লা আসে তো তুয়াই বল্লা যেত আসে জিবা আর কথা বুঝা দিয়ে ডাক্তার রুমিয়াই রে মানে বার্মি সম্মাদে বুঝা দিয়ে ইবা সুনামিয়া হদে ভয় বারে দরিমত্তর মিলিটারি দরিমত্তর হিতারে গুলি করে মারি ফেলাই মারানোর পরে বেলা এলা আরে তুয়াই বল্লা আসে দে টাইম মাঝে আর নাশাফুরুর ওকটায় হদে মানে ইবা ফারাম মাঝে নাই ইবা যে সময় মাঝে গিয়ালের হতা হয়ে হে সমুন্নতি ফারাতু নেই গিয়ে গই হড়ি গিয়ে গই আরা নদীকি এন হয়ে ওকটায় জবাব দিয়ে তো ওকটায় যে
So, so after I narrated my stories to Dr. Umya when he returns with his helicopter, the military came to find me and the interpreter who translated my language because I was needed translator, though I narrated my stories in Burmese and in Rohingya. So I also needed the translation at that time. So a person called Shunamia, he translated the things for me. So after the Dr. Umya returned, the military came to find me and Shunamia. When the military found the Shunamia, they killed him on the spot there, and the military also came to my village to find me, but the Ukata, the administrator of my village, told the military that since she shared her stories to the Dr. Umya, she left the village.
জি তো যে তোমার যে এলা মানুষ হদ দেখি ফাইজা মানুষ হদ দেখি মানে সুনামি আর যে তোমার যে দড়ি মতর গুলি করে মারি ফেলাই থরিয়া হেন্দিলা গুলি করে মারি ফেলাইব কিয়া থুই মানে তারা কি গজ্জে মিলিটারি কি গজ্জে কি না অগরে হিন বেকিলিং কি গজ্জে তুজা তোমার যে শেয়ার গজ্জস তার আল্লাহ কাদা কিয় গিয়ে গইয়া দাগ ফরি গিয়ে গই মিলিটারি অকল্লা হেতল্লা থরিয়া দড়ি ফেললে মারি ফেলাইব হয়েরার আই এলার ফুয়াওয়াল বাচ্চারে লয় আই কি গজিলাম আরেকদা মানে সিটির মাদে ফারা গিলাম বই আরেকদা ফারাম মাদে আই ফারা গিয়ে গই সাইদেত এদিন তারপর দিন লতি ফত্তি ফারা কেউ গিয়ে গয় কুরাসন্নান মানে টেঙাড়ানো ফারা ফানেন দিলে মিলিটারিও গিয়ে গই বানা আসো বিলরে আরে তুয়াইয়ে দে মিলিটারি মানে আরে দড়ি বললা ফত্তি ফারার ঐশ্বরমুর হদে তোরা মায়া ভয়বা যদি লত পায় দইতো গিলে তোরা কি করো আরে দড়ি দাও মায়া ভয়বারা আরা তু লাগের এন হয়েরও ভর্তি ফারা অকটা কলার হাসে মেসেজ পাঠাই তো মেসেজ তো পাঠাইয়ে এলাই আর কি না ভারি ফারাম মাঝে আর গরম মাঝে আর বিড়াম মাঝে আয় আর যাই না ভারি যাই না ভারানোর পরে আয় হালো রুম বাড়ির ভিতরে আসছিলাম দে 15 দিন পর্যন্ত হালো রুম বাড়ির ভিতরে আসছিলাম 15 দিন 14 দিন নাকি 12 দিন আইন দিলাম ওরা জঙ্গলের ভিতরে আসছিলাম আর বাসার এলে মানে গাছর হাইল পাতা হায় দিলা করে থাকিলাম তাকনোর পরে যেতম মাঝে দেশের হালত যে তো জুন্য দেখির আরো তো দৌড়ি ফেললে হামাকা মারি ফেলাব দিয়া নাই শত পাছে নাই নিজেও জানি অন্যজনীয় আরে মানুষে জনে আরে কি করে শেয়ার করে তাই আমি কি করছিলাম
Maybe she was having some internet issue. I will be translating whatever she said so far. So when the military already killed the interpreter who interpreted for me, my villagers told me that if I was continuously to stay in my village, I will also be killed by the military. So what I did was I left my village along with my child to another village, and the military was continuously looking for me with my pictures to all the villages. And the military also told the administrator of all the villages that if you saw this girl, report it to us. So I hid myself in the forest for at least 15 days, and we survived there in the forest by eating leaves.
एक को नेटवर्क सिरिगी दे हाड़िगी नहीं व्यापार
She's having internet issue, so maybe she will join again later. Maybe you can go ahead with the rest.
Thank you, Jani. Thank you, Jamalida. I think when she joins, we can later ask. Having said that, I think recounting these kind of incidences or a testimony of this sort is not easy at all. And I think I should have also given a trigger warning before sort of this instance was recounted, but it was I mean, she has lived through the tragedy. She continues to sort of deal with it. And I think we are all, I won't say awe is the right word, but I think we should maybe also listen to her even in discomfort, despite the discomfort, to actually understand the nature of the violence that the community has undergone. I think this is a good time to move on to the next speaker. Meenakshi Ganguly. Ma'am Ganguly has been the Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch. And I think while this was individual testimony, I think Meenakshi ma'am would be able to provide a more broader overview of the nature and extent of human rights abuses that has been occurring in Rakhine. For a fact, I know I refer to the reports by Human Rights Watch extensively. This has also informed a lot of my own dissertation research. So over to you, ma'am. I think if you could provide us an overview, that would be
Thank you so much for having me join here. First of all, I think all of us that have been working on this issue, she's not online, but I do want to apologize to Jamalida Begum because she has been incredibly brave from the time that it all started. And we in our own efforts and the world at large is still continuing to fail her. And for that, I think we should apologize. And actually, what Hafsar said remains true. This has been an ongoing issue for so long, and and we are nowhere close to any kind of solution, really. And Ria, I mean, your report is fantastic, but then I have to tell you that my heart breaks that 8 years on, when we are discussing 2017 and 8 years later, we are looking at almost the same kind of testimony again with a different perpetrator, which just makes it even sadder in terms of where we've all landed. And to that end, I suppose what we have to accept is that the world that we had imagined that would make common cause with human rights, with international law, is facing more and more challenges. It's facing more challenges than we were at in 2017 or 2015. I've been working on the Rohingya issue, I think, since 2012, 2015. And, we've seen a steady decline in the sort of collective outrage that should exist on what is happening to this community. Hafsar mentioned the humanitarian crisis. And we have to understand that apart from the ongoing new wars that have broken out in the Middle East and Africa and in Europe, we are also in a stage in the world where donor countries are having to redirect their funding towards defense, which means that even the US has cut down its aid, but when we went to other governments, they have to now direct a lot of their funding towards defense because of the new challenges that the Trump administration has put. So we're already witnessing a famine situation in Gaza, and I fear that what is happening in Rakhine State is something that we do not have the same kind of visibility, but the fear that the people that are working there are also flagging, that there is grave risk of people in acute need. So I think what we have to understand is that apart from all the other challenges that we are facing, we are also facing a sort of public rage around the world, fanned by opportunist political leaders to lead up to a crackdown on what we call irregular immigration. Now, irregular immigration is driven often by economic needs. But quite often what is happening is that refugees are being clubbed together with irregular immigration, and both have their own challenges. But for the Rohingya, when they're being told, go back where you came from, you ask any Rohingya and they will say, we really want to go back where we came from. That really is our primary ask. We want to go back home. So then what we should enable is for them to go back home. But we have to, for that to be possible, it has to be in the context of every refugee's right to a safe, voluntary, dignified return. And those conditions do not exist. I mean, RIA's report tells us that Rakhine State is perhaps worse than how they left it. The perpetrators have changed, but the junta is still active. We're hearing reports of new fighting. We're hearing reports of more people arriving. We are also hearing reports of Bangladesh stopping these people now. They're stuck on the other side of the Naf River. It's also rainy season, so people are not being able to swim across because the river is in spate. So, but I am really saddened to talk about RIA's report, because the one thing that we should have known is that when 1027 started, it was against a very abusive, brutal junta. And the one thing that the Arakan Army we had hoped would do was to make common cause with the Rohingya, because the Rohingya had also suffered from the same, from the same Myanmar military. But I think one of the things that happened from what we can gather is that the junta, even as it was losing ground in fighting, did manage to do some things to make the Rohingya life really uncomfortable and to make them once again objects of suspicion. They made them say on video that they supported the Myanmar military. They conscripted Rohingya and put them on the front line. So when the Arakan Army would actually come face to face with the military, they would meet Rohingya. And then you would constantly, then of course the any kind of communication that had begun between the communities began to fall apart. And right now, I was talking to some other Rohingya friends in the diaspora, because we're talking about the upcoming session in New York, and they were saying that there is no communication left, there is no conversation left. So where are the Rohingya going to go? Because again, there's conscription going on in the camps. So, and the junta's making vague promises about giving them citizenship rights. So then are they supposed to go there? And what Hafsar said, I mean, where are we supposed to go? What choice are we making? We do not have a solution that we can get behind. So as of now, a million Rohingya live in Bangladesh. They're living in a very, very crowded conditions. They do not have proper access to livelihood, to free movement. As I said, the children are at risk, and it's children quite often who are being at risk of forced recruitment by the Rohingya armed groups. The armed groups within the camps are also often criminal, and they are often also causing a lot of harm to their own community, including sexual abuse and forced marriage. And also, I mean, for a young Rohingya, there is no future that they can get behind. their own future or the future of their families, the future of their community, or the future of a nation that doesn't exist for them as of now. Some people, as Hafsar said, are in other places, in India, in Malaysia. Indonesia, they actually go to, but they really leave. I mean, Indonesia has perhaps been okay only because the boats land there, they let the boats come in, but most of them do not want to stay in Indonesia, then they start leaving and going on. So there are not very many that are in Indonesia. But I do want to speak about India, because as Sabir would say, there was a time when the Rohingya felt at least somewhat safe there. But again, it's the political narrative where Rohingya have become vulnerable because of their faith, because that is the reason that they're facing the kind of crisis that they're facing right now. And contrary to international practice, they're being returned. This is India that wants to seek a membership to the Human Rights Council this year, and yet is not complying with the most basic rule, whether they sign the Refugee Convention or not, which is you do not send a refugee back to a place where they're at risk, because frankly, they're at even greater risk now than when they fled. So it is really concerning about what is happening in India. But the Rohingya refugees remain unwelcome in most parts of the world. Third country settlement has really slowed down. And to that end, for safe return, at least the one step that, apart from the many steps that Hafsar laid out, there is the question of accountability. And that is where I come back to Jamalida Begum's story, horrible experience, and to tell her only that justice is a very slow process. And in this case, it's taking even more time than is warranted. The ICC prosecutor has issued an arrest warrant, but we don't know what is happening under there. Argentina is proceeding under universal jurisdiction. But meanwhile, the junta has declared elections. We have not as yet heard from ASEAN, from India, from US, from UK, from Japan, from China, what this election is going to even look like. So when this meeting happens in New York, I think the one thing that we are really missing is Rohingya representation. We don't know as yet whether Rohingya are even going to be able to attend this meeting. And unless any high-level conference hears voices like Hafsar, hears voices like Sabir, hears voices like Jamalida Begum, there is not going to be a solution, because that is the only way that the world will now turn back its attention to a crisis that has festered for so long. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was very concise and yet sort of laid out the picture. On the question of accountability that you had raised, and this multiple nature of crisis that is sort of happening globally, and this lack of accountability not only by the global south but also by the global north, which sort of initiated the externalization regime but has now removed or is sort of shirking responsibility from that as well. I think at this juncture, it would be interesting to listen to what Klaus has to say, because he, along with Hafsa and APRRN, has been doing a lot of work on coalition building and to hold national government and various stakeholders and to bring them together and to make them a little accountable. I think over to you, Klaus. If you could, Klaus is also the Co-Secretary General of APRRN, and he has been in this space for almost 20 years and working to bring about positive change for minorities and marginalized people by designing and driving, influencing partnership, mobilization, and capacity building strategies. Over to you, Klaus.
Can you hear me now? Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I'm just going to be a little bit brief and actually talk more about how we as APRIN function as a coalition within in and of ourselves, but also how we work with others. And I will just at the end talk add a little bit more about how, what we are calling for exactly. But I think colleagues after this will be talking more about that, concrete. I think John and others will. So I will just start by very briefly saying to those who do not know that APRIN is a network of around 320 members now. We are fortunate to have the Rohingya Human Rights Initiative among our members across 28 countries in Asia and the Pacific. And we do advocacy and capacity building mainly. That's our business. When we talk about collaboration among the very many actors who are engaged in migration governance and refugee rights generally in Asia, it's very complex. It's also very sensitive issues, and in a context where changes happen very rapidly. Our own network has a Rohingya working team. Saber is one of them, for example, and Ali, who are speaking here as well. And we put emphasis on having people with lived experience. I'll take note of what my colleague who previously spoke about, the fact that we need people with lived experience at the high level, but also meeting in New York, but also in many other places. So our collaborators consist of people with lived experience. We are expanding that in our network, and I are continuously arguing and asking for more to be involved. But we also have, sort of experts, practitioners, academia, NGOs, and we come together to look at, the very complex Rohingya issues, but also many other issues around detention and so forth. And we are trying to carry out activities at local, national, regional, and international level. And I think that is perhaps what is APRIN's strength, that we have a connection at very ground level, including in Cox's Bazar, and we can bring that up to when we have discussions with policymakers and decision makers. As you know, of course, many people cannot travel, but what we have done before, when Hafsa and I were in Australia last year to speak to policy and decision makers in Canberra and so forth, we had pre-recorded a couple of videos from people in the Canberra and other places to say to the Australian government directly what it is that they would want, what role they would want Australia to play on refugee protection and the ensuring of human rights of other migrants in the region as well. Just to talk about a little bit, because this is, as you probably all know, a lot of work is being done on that. There are very many actors, but I think from our experience, to really have a very good network, a basic thing as mutual trust and respect is a prerequisite. But also, while we acknowledge the existing expertise within our network, we really have to get new people on board as well, because we need to reflect the diverse population that exists, and also within the Rohingya communities. I think someone earlier talked about women and girls, for example. There seems to be an underrepresentation of those, and someone also in the chat box mentioned queer Rohingya refugees. So this is something we are very alert to. How do you actually represent the group, the Rohingya group, and others that we work on in a fair manner that really reflects the diversity within these communities? A couple of words about meaningful refugee participation again, because it is something that we are taking very serious and are pushing for. That is, of course, very, very important, but not only that, it has to be diverse and intentional as well. And we see that within our own backyard again, that sometimes the diversity of people with lived experience are not actually represented. It tends to be those who speak English very well, who knows the corridors in Geneva and New York, who have been there before, who speak the UN jargons, for example, that tend to be taken or invited. Partly also because, they are trusted partners of UN agencies and so forth, which is well enough. But again, we are trying to diversifying and facilitating that space. One other thing, it really is about getting people on board, when we address these issues. It is not a ticking off the box kind of thing and say, okay, we have actually decided what we're going to do as a coalition, as a government, as a UN, but it's actually having people, a broad, diverse segment of the Rohingya population in this case, to be part of the solution from the outset, as you know, as a recommendation, as a solution is being addressed, and not sort of midway through or at the end, just to tick a box. Just a couple of more things about how we do this. For example, last year we did with Saber and Ali, who were speaking here, and one other person from Rohingya, we issued a press release on the very dire situation in Arakan State, and it was driven by these three people, and we had a minor role here to do, and you know, a quote was coming from the people themselves, not us or the secretaries general, which had been the case so forth, because you know we are not the experts, we are not living there. So I think little things like that to really get the voices across in a very, very meaningful way is super important. A couple of things more about, you know, how when you do a coalition building, and for it to be meaningful and sustainable, it's also capacity building, and we are doing that with various groups. So, for example, we work with some Rohingya refugee women group in Malaysia. We're doing some projects in Cox's Bazar on legal empowerment training of women again. One or two more things for me, and then I will stop, because I know that we're perhaps running a little bit outside of the time. I think also when we talk about, you know, coalition building and advocacy, we also have to think outside the box sometimes. And while we, for example, work with UNHCR a lot, this makes sense, there are other UN agencies that are relevant. For example, OHCHR, UN Women, UNICEF, and so forth. Which is not always the case when these issues are being addressed. And then the last thing, I don't want to go into actually, you know, what kind of recommendations we are doing. We did a Rohingya briefer not too long ago, and we can put a link to that, where there are lots of recommendations on that. And of course, right now is the you know, the main issues, the main challenges is this funding shortfall that Hafsa mentioned earlier. It's also the dire lack of political will for many states to do anything about this in any meaningful way. But one thing I would like to add, and then I will close, is that in addition to, for us, pushing towards changes in policies and practices, so working with governments, UN agencies, and so forth, trying to get somewhere, it's also about changing the narratives, so to change people's attitudes and behavior. And in this case, you know, with Rohingya population, it really is super important that we do some work, and some work is being done around how to demystify, you know, these sort of preconceived perceptions of who these new populations or newish populations to host communities are, and so forth. And there are various initiatives being done to address that, to try to actually focus more on what communities have in common than that which divides them. And with that, I will close. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Klaus. That was very interesting, short and brief. And I think that set the scene. And this is where I would like John to also come in, because of course, we're looking at fund cuts, and we're talking about how the situation is going to get dire 2025 December onwards. And like Hafsa and Meenakshi ma'am after her, and even Klaus sort of pointed out. But I think it is also necessary to understand that these funding or these aids are not the benevolence of the donor states. I think it's also informed by the policy of keeping these communities outside of their own borders, and now they are sort of shirking from that responsibility. And of course, this lack of political will, this change in political will that is happening globally, which is sort of very against the whole refugee regime. I think, John, if you could shed some light on it, and also talk about the Rohingya case a little more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to keep it quite brief here, because I think we're running low on time. I think, as Meenakshi pointed out and others on the panel, we're facing a bit of a human rights crisis globally. And you know, I'm here in Cox's Bazar, calling in, trying to meet with refugees to understand their perspectives. We particularly are looking at accountability, and August 25th is the anniversary of the genocidal attacks against the Rohingya. It's not just Fortify Rights that said that there was genocide and crimes against humanity. The independent international fact-finding mission on Myanmar said that there was reasonable grounds to believe that genocide and crimes against humanity were perpetrated by the Myanmar military and others in 2016 and 17. And because of this impunity, 4 years later, you had Min Aung Hlaing, the same military commander that oversaw the genocide, commit a coup and commit war crimes and crimes against humanity. So I just want to outline like some of the different international accountability mechanisms that are in place. There is as Manashi and others on the panel said, there's pros and cons to international accountability. In other parts of Myanmar, you have domestic courts that have been set up in Kachin State, in Karenni State, in Karen State. In Rakhine State, there hasn't been this similar process, and those courts are a lot less independent because you have an actor like the Arakan Army that's not a good faith actor. But I will talk about the International Court of Justice. Theirs was one of the first international cases brought, and that is a state crime case brought by the Gambia. And in January of next year, 2016, we'll finally hear the merits of that case. So the merits meaning, is Myanmar as a state responsible for genocide? Because before 2006, before next year, 2026, the court wasn't even looking at the merit stages of the case. So that will be really interesting early next year to actually hear about did genocide happen against the Rohingya. I think all of us on this call have documented ongoing genocide, and there are provisional measures in place to look at the crime of genocide. The second case is you have the International Court of Justice. That's a case of individual perpetrators being held responsible. And that continues to investigate the crime against humanity of deportation against the Rohingya in 2016 and 2017. The ICC prosecutor, as Manashi also mentioned, issued a request for an arrest warrant for Major General Min Aung Hlaing. This arrest warrant is really amazing. I mean, he's a top-level commander, and this is good for all people in Myanmar. This is good for the Kachin, the Shan, the Karen that have also experienced violations under the Myanmar military. But this case of General Min Aung Hlaing, and the issuing of a potential arrest warrant, that's because of the Rohingya case. So I think that's important to note that crime against humanity deportation case is because of the crimes that happened in 2016, 2017. But accountability and trying Min Aung Hlaing will benefit everyone in Myanmar. The third area I want to look at is Tun Kin. He brought a case of universal jurisdiction. He's a friend and colleague. That case was in Argentina, or is in Argentina, and it's one of the fastest moving cases, even faster moving than the ICC or ICJ. And so that they've also issued an arrest warrant in that case. But 8 years on, we see crimes happening as the report documents, Ashes of Rakhine, by other perpetrators outside the Myanmar military. And we've documented crimes by the Arakan Army as well, detention, torture, killings of civilians. So we've called on the International Criminal Court to investigate potential war crimes by the Arakan Army. The ICC, they have jurisdiction stemming from the Rohingya case in 2016, 2017, and the ICC's jurisdiction is indefinite in its investigation and could focus on individual groups or perpetrators deemed responsible outside the Myanmar military. And so that includes crimes by the Arakan Army. And I think that's really important to note, that the kind of crimes that the Arakan Army are perpetrating now could rise to the level of international crimes. And we've looked at international humanitarian law, which is known as the laws of war, and breaches of the laws of war happening in Rakhine State by the Arakan Army. So these are possible war crimes happening. I also just want to note, it's not just the Arakan Army and the Myanmar military that are committing potential breaches of international law. You also have Rohingya armed groups that have committed crimes in Bangladesh and in Myanmar. And we documented abductions, torture, and killings by these Rohingya armed groups against Rohingya human rights defenders and others who oppose them. And in 2019, the prosecutor at that time said that the case at the ICC would also review allegations committed by ARSA, the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. So I think that it's important for us to note, when we're looking at international accountability, that all perpetrators that are committing international crimes could be held responsible in these courts. These courts are not perfect, but we hope in the following years that crimes could be prosecuted by these courts, not just by the Myanmar military, but by members of the Arakan Army, members of ARSA, and others that continue to commit abuses. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, John. That was very important. And thanks for outlining the fact that it's not just the Arakan Army of the junta, and there are multiple perpetrators which are sort of giving rise to this crisis. And I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce John at that point in time. John is the director of Fortified Rights, and he's been associated with the organization since 2016. Thank you, John. I think at this juncture, it would be interesting to listen to Dr. Zarni. He is a Burmese genocide scholar and a human rights activist. He was also one of the first people to document the nature of genocide that was occurring in Rakhine, and he co-published with Natalie Brinham, which looks at Myanmar's persecution of the Rohingya through the social legal genocide framework. I think, Dr. Zarni, you can take the conversation from John, and you can talk about how these multiple international bodies work in bringing the perpetrators, or in holding the perpetrators accountable, and also just documenting the systemic nature of crisis. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Samawita. I think I don't have good good news, needless to say, on the accountability at the leadership level, either within the Myanmar's domestic judicial system, or the new sub-state judicial systems in Kachin and a few other places that John rightly mentioned. Just a couple of things I want to get it out. As you know, we are living through the policy of mass starvation in Gaza at the moment. 500,000 people declared, facing the starvation. It's not a famine. But the reason I mentioned this is done with absolute no regard for future accountability. This is done so transparently and so blatantly. It's a 24/7 live stream. And so I think I will circle back to the Rohingya issue. For now, please allow me to mention that when I was outside the Church of Nativity last year in Bethlehem, in Palestine, the occupied Palestine, a couple of Palestinian security guards, as soon as they discovered that I was from Myanmar, because my Palestinian friend asked for them to let me in because it was after hour and I wanted to see it. I only had one evening. They were very, very angry at me at the mention of Myanmar, and then they said, Do you know Rohingya? Do you know Rohingya? These are Palestinians. They themselves are living under occupation. They show that level of awareness and compassion for what Rohingyas have been going through, right? And so I feel it's my responsibility uh, to also bring attention to those of us with Rohingya concern to what the Palestinians are going through. Yeah. Uh, Number one problem we see is that people like ourselves, that scholars, academics, activists, NGO workers, civil society representatives, what have you, we have plenty of conscience and compassion among ourselves, individually and collectively. But those who run powerful institutions that can make a difference, that can stop genocide, that can facilitate return of Rohingya, safely to their ancestral land in Western Myanmar. They have neither. So we have to face, the ugly fact that people with conscience and compassion have no power to actually affect, the change for the better for people like Rohingya, and those who have power have no conscience, no compassion. That's the baseline with which we have to confront this issue. Second, I agree with Hafsa and also the previous speakers. Number one, the Rohingya representation is sorely lacking in all the important meetings, right? And Rohingyas have been used as tokens, token representation in the national unity government, of that emerged, out of the anti-coup resistance movement. Doesn't really embrace Rohingya as full and equal members of Myanmar as a nation state. It's a tokenism. They have a vice minister in charge of the human rights, right? And also, very troublingly, 8 years after the genocide, or the largest wave of genocidal destruction, because Natalie and I argued, as early as 2000, basically 11, the genocide has been instituted as a matter of policy, and it's a process that has been grinding on since 1978, when the first wave of Rohingyas, about 200,000, were violently expelled or deported into Cox's Bazar. 1978, yeah. That's, I mean, how many years? Over 40 years. And so the to in terms of national accountability inside Myanmar, we have a situation where the predominantly Buddhist society and largely pro-democracy or federalist ethnic communities, Christians, the Buddhists, they have not acknowledged that Rohingyas have suffered genocide and continue to suffer genocide at the hands of a new perpetrator, Arakan Army. Yeah, and within 1 year, from 2024 and until now, a little over a year, additional 150,000 Rohingyas have been violently driven out. They did not just flee, they were driven out violently for their lives into Bangladesh by the Arakan Army, because they now control, as Samawita mentioned in the introduction, a large swathe of the Arakan or Rakhine State, and all of the Rohingya, territories, including the areas where 300 villages were razed to the ground in 2017, right? The other thing is, as grateful as I am to the Bangladeshi government, the previous one that got ousted, and also the new one, under Dr. Yunus, I think Bangladesh could have done a lot more to put Rohingya in the driver's seat. There are 300,000 Rohingya youth that are school-going aged, from kindergarten all the way to university and maybe even postgraduate level. And these people, these young Rohingya, the future generation, out of a total of 1 million in Cox's Bazar and other places, they are going to be the backbone of the Rohingya society if and when they are able to build their own national community as part of Myanmar. And they have not been helped. I understand that Tom Andrews had a meeting with Dr. Yunus that I think yesterday or today, and the Bangladeshi leader lamented the funding cut and how that affected the Bangladesh capacity to provide education and healthcare to the Rohingyas, 1 million. So today we have the largest community of Rohingya in Bangladesh in refugee camps. All of them want to go home. They feel they are being trapped. They're between hard and the rock and the hard place, and they should have been provided proper education, like women, men, both sexes. But that has not been the case. We've been to like Rohingya camps. We heard the stories of rape, mass rape, arson, violence, and all kinds of atrocities committed by the Myanmar military, supported by Myanmar society as a whole, including by Aung San Suu Kyi, who's in jail now. So we must not forget, the perpetrators are not just simply armed groups. My other point in terms of accountability is that by the time a political state or militia group is able to commit large-scale atrocities against an ethnic or national community, the society is already there in that genocidal space. The society has been primed to go along, to cheerlead, to support the direct violence. So Myanmar society today, after 8 years since 2017, August and September, has failed to come to terms with their own active complicity and in many cases cheerleading in this the continuing atrocity. So inside Myanmar, I don't really see any the prospect for society and also the Burmese language media even today, right? And finally, I think the deputy director from Human Rights Watch, Meenakshi, talked about Myanmar junta making or forcing the remaining Rohingyas inside, under or roughly 600,000, to declare their support for the junta or the military presence in their villages and towns, right? When the junta is faced with the new armed group in Rakhine State, Arakan Army. Now the Arakan Army has forced, in my view, the Rohingya elders and religious leaders, right, who live under the Arakan Army's boot, to say the Arakan Army did not commit, the massacre or the atrocities, right? And so I think like the Rohingyas are caught in this, triangular oppression, like the oppressors alternating, the Burmese military, the supported by Aung San Suu Kyi and the National League for Democracy, and now the Arakan Army. And then finally, very, very finally, all the armed groups, ethnic resistance organizations, and majority of civil society organizations, to this day, refuse to issue a single statement condemning the perpetrators, whether it's, they are prone to condemn the Myanmar military. It's not that Myanmar military is not responsible. They are number one responsible. The Arakan Army is the runner-up in this genocide. And so I think, we have a very, very depressing situation outside because the United States is attacking all the accountability mechanisms. The law, international law or national laws in the West are used to punish those who oppose genocide by Israel in Palestine. And the most powerful country in the world, the United States, is attacking and trying to neuter International Criminal Court, its officials, its judges, right? So in that scenario, we don't have bright spot. The only bright spot is that the Rohingyas refuse to give up. And so because they don't refuse to give up, and none of us has the right to withdraw our support for Rohingya. And so I think that we have to put Rohingyas front, left, and center of anything we do. And that's why people like Saber, Ali, and then the earlier the sister who spoke and lost the connection. These are very, very important people that we need to listen to and make sure that they get the platform. And we are not the spokesperson. We are supporters. They are the spokesperson for their own cause. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sani. And I think on that note, it's you ended it on a very important and crucial note. And I think it's important to get Rohingya speakers. And on that note, I think the note that Rohingyas refuse to give up. I think we have one such incredible speaker, Saberji. Saberji was born as a Rohingya. He's a part of the community. He was born in Butidong Township, Arakan State in Myanmar. The he left the country in 2005 to search for a better life in Bangladesh, but he ended up as a refugee in India since 2005. And I think he has done brilliant advocacy work. He speaks multiple languages, and he is one of those people from the community, and he's a Rohingya who just refuses to give up. I think over to Saberji.
Thank you, Sonvidya ji. Can I speak Hindi? Uh, 2023 से लेके अब तक म्यांमार में जो हुआ है, इस चीज़ के ऊपर हम फोकस कर रहे थे। प्रीवियसली हम हमारी टीम और एप्रन के साथ मिलके हमने एक रिपोर्ट निकाला था साइक्लोन मोका के ऊपर 2023 नवंबर में। 2024 जनवरी में हमने पब्लिश किया था। ये म्यांमार मिलिट्री अरकान आर्मी ये एट्रोसिटी स्टार्ट कर रहा था, करने के लिए तैयारी कर रहा था, तब हम लोग ऑलरेडी इसके ऊपर रिपोर्ट में छोटा सा ब्रीफ भी किया था। जिस तरीके हम लोगों ने लोगों से सुना है, जिस तरीके हमने डॉक्यूमेंट किया है, एज द सेम चीज इससे ज़्यादा सीरियस ह्यूमन राइट वायलेशन 2024 अप्रैल, मई, जून, जुलाई मोंगडू बुतिडाओ में मास ब्रूटली किलिंग किया है, घर जलाया है, रेप किया है, और बहुत सारा लोगों से हमने बात किया सर्वाइवर्स के साथ, और इस चीज़ को हमने डॉक्यूमेंट किया है। और अरकान आर्मी के पास रिसोर्सेज ज़्यादा है, और इन लोगों के पास इंटरनेशनली प्रोपेगेंडा फैलाने के लिए भी लोग हैं, पीएचडी स्कॉलर्स वगैरह है। रोहिंग्या जो सरवाइव कर रहे हैं रखाइन स्टेट के अंदर, जो पयासिरी विलेज में जो मासिकर किया है 600 लोगों के ऊपर, वहाँ से 346 लोगों को हमने नाम के साथ, एज के साथ, मेल फीमेल एज ग्रुप के साथ हमने आइडेंटिफाई किया है। इस चीज़ को डिनाई नहीं कर सकते। अरकान आर्मी ने जिस तरीके म्यांमार मिलिट्री ने गुदामफरा विलेज में 2027 में जो वायलेंस किया था, इससे ज़्यादा अरकान आर्मी ने इस तरीका करके लोगों को मारा है। और अगस्त 5 को भी 2024 में बांग्लादेश की बॉर्डर साइड में भी अराउंड 300 रोहिंग्यास को भी ड्रोन अटैक के जरिए मारा है हमने, के लिए तब भी स्टेटमेंट्स वगैरह रिलीज किया था। के बाद अरकान आर्मी की तरफ से 80,000 के ऊपर लोगों को बंदी बना के रखा है बुतिडोंग के अंदर। उन लोगों की वहाँ पे फूड नहीं है, मेडिसिन नहीं है, हॉस्पिटल नहीं है। और वहाँ पे जो 18 साल की लड़कियां हैं, माइनर लड़कियां हैं, उन लोगों को अरकन आर्मी उनके साथ रोज सेक्सुअल अब्यूज कर रहे हैं, रेप कर रहे हैं, और यूथ वगैरह को रिक्रूट कर रहे हैं, और पैसे वगैरह लूटपाट कर रहे हैं, और रोहिंग्यास की हिस्टोरिकल जो जगह है इस चीज़ को मिटा रहे हैं। और रोहिंग्यास की जो मेजर जो रोहिंग्यास एरिया है वहाँ से इन लोगों की घर वगैरह जला के अलग अलग जगहों में डिस्प्लेस कर दिया है। उसके बाद 2 साल से वहाँ पे इंटरनेट बंद है। जो भी इंफॉर्मेशंस आ रहे हैं वो लिमिटेड बेसिस है। और ये जो भी हम लोगों ने फोटो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन इकट्ठा किया रिपोर्ट के लिए, कुछ लोग रेंगून पहुंचे, कुछ लोग थाईलैंड पहुंचे, कुछ लोग मलेशिया पहुंचे, कुछ लोग बांग्लादेश पहुंचे, और उसके ज़रिए हमने वीडियोग्राफी वगैरह लिया है, और रेप विक्टिम से हमने बात किया है। होयासिरी की विलेज में जो मासिकर किया है 600 लोगों के ऊपर, वहाँ से एक फैमिली मेंबर बचा हुआ है, 9 लोग उनके घर पे ख़त्म हो गया है। बहुत सारा होयासिरी विलेज की विक्टिम के साथ हम लोगों ने बात किया। उस वहाँ पे इंसिडेंट होने के बाद 3 महीने बाद वहाँ पे एक रिलेटिव जाके इस फोटोग्राफ को लिया है। फिर वो बांग्लादेश में किसी भी तरीके पहुँचे, हमारे तक ये फोटो पब्लिश हुआ है। तो हमने रिपोर्ट निकालने के लिए लेट हो रहे थे, तब लोगों ने सोशल मीडिया में शेयर किया, ह्यूमन राइट्स वॉच ने 45 राइट्स वगैरह ने रिपोर्ट वगैरह पब्लिश किया है इसके बारे में। अभी जो है अरकन आर्मी जो है उस जगह की कुछ लोग बचे हुए थे, लोगों को इकट्ठा करके पैसे में से दे की, थ्रेट वगैरह दे की, इन लोगों से वीडियो स्टेटमेंट लेने के लिए कोशिश कर रहे हैं। इन लोगों को 600 लोगों को म्यांमार मिलिट्री ने मारा है, ये चीज दिखवाने के लिए। रोहिंग्यास के साथ जिनोसाइड डिक्लेयर किया, यूएस ने किया, यूएन ने किया। जिनोसाइड के ऊपर जिनोसाइड हो रहा है, उसके ऊपर नॉर्मलाइज करने के लिए कोई काम नहीं कर रहे हैं। और यूएन मैकेनिज्म टीम्स और फैक्ट फाइंडिंग मिशन टीम्स जो रिपोर्ट बना रहे हैं या जो भी आवाज़ रोहिंग्यास के लिए निकाल रहे हैं, वो लिमिटेड हिसाब के जरिए निकल रहे हैं। जिस तरीके फ़लस्तीन में 60,000 लोगों को मारे हैं, ख़त्म किए हैं, इसी तरीके कंटिन्यूसली रोहिंग्यास के साथ अगर हम टाइमली हिसाब करके आएंगे, 2012, 2017, 2016 और 2014, 2015 इसको हिसाब करेंगे, तो सिमिलर इतना लोग समुद्र में और बांग्लादेश की बॉर्डर में बुदिडा मोंगडू में, साइटो में अंदर इतना लोग ख़त्म भी हो चुका ऑलमोस्ट। और रोहिंग्यास के पास इंटरनेशनल इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया भी नहीं है, प्रोफेशनल कोई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन रिसर्च टीम ग्रुप भी नहीं है। अरकान आर्मी के पास म्यांमार जो प्रोपेगेंडा स्टार्ट करते हैं रोहिंग्यास के अगेंस्ट, उनके पास रिसोर्सेज ज़्यादा है, तो एक्चुअल विक्टिम सफ़र कर रहे हैं म्यांमार के अंदर। अभी जो रोहिंग्या की जो छोटा मोटा जो इंफॉर्मेशन पास करते थे बांग्लादेश के सिम वगैरह यूज़ करके, उस सिम को भी आज के दिन जो है 4 बजे म्यांमार अरकान आर्मी ने उसको छीन के लेके गया लोगों से। डे बाय डे कंटिन्यूस वहाँ पे जो रोहिंग्या है उनके लिए जान की खतरा है। तो ये इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी की फेलियर है, और इतनी सारा हमारे साथ हादसा हो रहा है, हमने इसके ऊपर एक रोहिंग्यास की वॉइस को अवेयर नहीं कर पाया है, हमारा भी कुछ चीज़ें फेलियर है। तो हमने हमारे रिसर्च टीम ने वॉलंटियरली इस चीज़ को 2 साल से मेहनत करके इस रिपोर्ट को रेडी किया है। और बांग्लादेश रिपार्टेशन के ऊपर बात कर रहे हैं, इंडिया डिपोटेशन के ऊपर बात कर रहे हैं। जिस जगह में बेचने के लिए चाह रहे हैं उस जगह में रोहिंग्या रहने के लायक नहीं है वो जगह। म्यांमार मिलिट्री भी कंटिन्यूसली मार रहे हैं, अरकान आर्मी कंटिन्यूसली लोगों को ख़त्म कर रहे हैं, तो रिपार्टेशन कहाँ करने के लिए लोग बात करते हैं। तो अभी जो है रोहिंग्यास के साथ जस्टिस देने के लिए और रोहिंग्यास के ऊपर जो एट्रोसिटी हुआ है, पीसफुली रहने के लिए जगह के ऊपर बात नहीं कर रहे हैं कोई भी। और हम इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी से और मीडिया से, एनजीओ से हम अपील कर रहे हैं रोहिंग्या इश्यूज पे, जिस तरीके 2017 में कंटिन्यूसली काम किया था। रोहिंग्यास के ऊपर इस तरीके का काम करने चाहिए, और जो रोहिंग्यास के साथ ग्राउंड में कनेक्टेड है ऐसे लोगों को इंटरनेशनल फोरम में बात करने के लिए एस्टेब्लिश भी कराने चाहिए। और जो बांग्लादेश में जो रेप विक्टिम्स आए हैं, जो अभी अरकान आर्मी की तरफ से अट्रॉसिटी करके 1,80,000 लोग जो आए हैं, उन लोगों को वहाँ पे स्पेसिफिकली यूएन मैकेनिज्म रिपोर्ट होने चाहिए। जो हम बात कर रहे हैं, जो ह्यूमन राइट्स वॉच, जो एमनेस्टी इंटरनेशनल, 45 राइट जो बात कर रहे हैं, इस चीज़ को अकाउंटेबल के साथ इंटरनेशनली आईसीजी तक पहुंचने के लिए। थैंक यू सो मच।
Thank you, Sabirji. I'll try and translate that. If I miss something out, we have to. So we have been trying to document the atrocities that is taking place in Rakhine State between 2023 and 2024. In 2023, when he had published a report on Cyclone Mocha, we had very briefly mentioned about the preconditions of genocidal preconditions which were already there in Rakhine at that point in time. Things only got worse. In 2024, it reached massive levels. Mass atrocities, sexual assault, brutality against the Rohingya community reached its zenith, and this time the perpetrators were the Arakan Army. In August 5th, 2024, there were almost 300 Rohingyas killed by drone attack. Almost 346, we have documentation that almost 346 Rohingyas were killed in Hoyaseri village. At present, almost 80,000 people are being held in prisoner-like conditions in Butidong. There is no food, no medical supplies, no access to outside world, as if they have no means of getting their news out to the outside world. This is a very concerted and a systemic attack, not just by the junta but also by the Arakan army to remove traces of Rohingya from their homeland, which is the Rakhine. At this point, the community has nowhere to go and no way to get the news out because there has been internet shutdown in the region for almost 2 years. Of course, when we were collecting the testimonies, and right now also we have accounts from the survivors who are saying that the Arakan army is trying to establish the fact that junta was responsible for some of the killings in August 5th last year, and also the Hoyaseri massacre that took place. And we've not been able to, and the Rohingyas in the region are not being able to get the information out because, of course, a lot of the resources and the access to information it stays with the Arakan army. And despite the UN and the US recognizing the nature of genocide that has been committed against the Rohingya, the situation continues to be dire. As of now, people who were getting information out with the help of some Bangladeshi SIM cards, their SIM cards are being confiscated, and this is a news that we have from today, latest 4 p.m. And finally, I think Bangladesh is talking about repatriation, but where would the Rohingyas go? Is the situation livable at all? Is the forget about living? Is the situation? I mean, do you think that the community can even survive in Rakhine given the kind of violence that we are subjecting them to in Rakhine? So I think this is the sum of it. Ria, if I've missed something out, could you just add?
Yeah, just one thing to add. He also mentioned that the genocide is so normalized that people are almost desensitized to the tragedy. And today we're seeing, Palestine's genocide, and it is one of the most well documented genocides. And so we have accurate reporting and numbers, as accurate as it can be in such circumstances, of what is going on the ground. We have visuals, we have photos, and all these things. But he said that Rohingyas don't have those resources. They don't have phones, they don't have SIM cards, the internet's been shut down for a while. There's brutal crackdown. And there are probably the reason why we don't have numbers, the reason why a lot of Rohingyas have just simply gone missing in the public conscience is because so many, if not more, have gone just lost to the sea, are lost to the tedious boat journeys that they take, that there are no records of the people who've gone missing. But if you totally add those numbers up and total them, they're probably close to, if not equaling, the Palestinian genocide. So just because the data is not there, there's a lot of crackdown on information. And whatever little information we as an organization and other organizations working on it are able to collect, even those are now being cracked down on. With regards to the Bangladesh, in Bangladesh they're taking away SIMs, and there's more crackdown on people in Myanmar, that they're not able to tell their stories or report on the massacre, how many people they've lost. So there are no records of the people who are now going missing, and so it's just not documented at all. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Ria. I think we are a little short on time, but I would like to introduce the next speaker, which is Saifullah Mohammed. Saifullah Mohammed is the co-founder of the Rohingya Center of Canada. He is also the managing director there. I think over to you, Saifullah ji. And in the meantime, if somebody has questions, I would request you to put them in the chat box. We'll try and take some of them towards the end. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, good morning and good evening, and peace be upon you who are joining from all over the corners. I am speaking from Bangladesh. So today, I will be very brief because our previous speakers so powerfully capture all the situations and current needs, and hardly anything left to add. But I would like to humbly touch on just a few points. Today we gather under a shadow of immense pains. We have 2 days left to be 8 years with an unwavering resolve. The launch of these reports by Rohingya Human Rights Network, the Ashes of Rakhine. It's not just a symbolic gesture. This is a declarations that even in the ashes, we carry the spark of truth or of justice. So let me be clear only in one thing. This report is all about atrocities committed against Rohingya. The Arakan Army's brutal attacks, burning villages, executing unarmed civilians, and denying humanitarian access are not isolated act of war. They are crime against humanity. Everyone's know that, but crime that require international legal scrutiny, not political silence. But we have been seeing that we all know what's going on when we raise this voice against a powerful armed groups. Because in the eye of many, Rohingya lives, Rohingya lives remains disposable. Because Burma's cycle of violence, military dictatorships, armed resistance, and what we call ceasefire repeat, and never includes Rohingya voices. Because every time Burma burns, we are left in the ashes. So accountability must start with recognitions. I echo with Kozani, recognitions that Rohingya are not collateral damage. We are a people. We are rightful inhabitant of Arakans, and we deserve justice not as a victim, but as a rightful citizen of that land. We must push for an independent international investigations, not only against the military, but also those who are involved in such kind of crimes against civilians. Silence is complicity, and selective condemnation is injustice, which is we have been seeing for a long time. The international community invest in preventions and must invest in prevention, not through the words, but through the enforceable mechanisms, embargo, such as whatever needed to bring peace and also equal rights for the Rohingya people. Let me say this with absolutely clearly. Burma's problems will not be solved outside Burma. It will be all inside Burma. But it will never be solved by creating new warlords in place of old generals. Armed groups will not surrender after ceasefire. They never have. This is why the only path forward is a civilian-led, right-based transitions where all ethnic groups, including Rohingya, are at the table, not as a token, but as a partner. And Rohingya need a place, not just any place, but a rightful, protected, and dignified place to live. Everyone say that, but whenever it comes to Bangladesh, they say about the repatriations. The Rohingya will not be sent back to Burma like DHL or some other packages send them back and coming back again. But that place where the Rohingya should be is Arakan State, but not Arakan governed by terror, not Arakan where genocide is tolerated, Arakan or Rakhine State where only armed actors hold their futures. With the Rohingya carry countless of pains, but also the courage to raise again and again. May these Ashes of Rakhine, this report, be the last, the perfect or reaching point to have an accountability, to reach out to many peoples. I hope every day what we are learning, what we are seeing, it should be stopped. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saifullah. Those are very powerful words, and those are some very powerful calls to justice. And I do agree that the solution needs to be inside Burma, but it also needs international support from outside in dire situations. I think we have the next speaker, who's also the last speaker, but Ali Johar is the co-director and head of education at the Rohingya Human Rights Initiative. Ali is was also born in Arakan State in Myanmar and was only 10 when he was forced to flee and find refuge in Bangladesh and then to India in 2012. Ali is a human rights activist, a lawyer, and advocate for stateless people, refugees, and the detention crisis that they face. Over to you, Ali. I think you can sum up the sessions and talk about some of the ways forward and what can be done by young Rohingya activists such as yourself.
Thanks, Samanvita, and thanks everyone. And also, my apologies, I will keep my camera off because it's very early morning where I'm joining from. You know, all the colleagues and everyone who have spoken before me have, you know, already highlighted much of what I have to say about what the situation in Arakan and with the Rohingyas. But you know, I'll slightly touch upon the background of the report. In 2023, both Sabir and I and our entire team was going through a lot of security issues because of what we do as human rights defender. We document, publish a report, try to advocate for the rights of the Rohingyas in Myanmar, Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, India, and elsewhere. And because of this, we have been going through security and threats for detention, deportation, and abuses. But we have also had to go to hiding. But during this time, in the beginning of 2023, we have noticed that the continuity of the Rohingya genocide in Arakan does not only continue to happen, but also now there are other actors like Arakan Army who are, joining the force of the genocide. But Sabir and I was very scared to see how renowned ex-diplomats, so-called human rights defender, and also some people who call themselves friends of Rohingyas, but behind the door they are lobbying for the Arakan Army, who is one of the main perpetrators against Rohingyas. And when I was discussing with Sabir about this, and we thought of doing something, but this was a time when we both were facing a lot personally due to the security situation we've been facing. And we did not had any resources to continue a research. Thanks to everyone, including Samanvita and Ria, who have, tirelessly contributed their time to make this report happen. But in the beginning of 2023, when we have started documenting things, the horrifying evidence of we have came to know. But in 2024, when we continue to document in May second week, the only hope I had to return to my country one day and see my home was erased along with my entire village, which is Buthidaung Ward number 1. And this was just after we have heard the news of the massacre in Hoyasuri village on May 2024. And both these incidents added traumas on me. And, there were times of breakdown even in between when we were collecting evidence of this. Sabir would always be like a, elder brother to me, and even mentally supporting while I would break down what, recounting on the atrocities and documenting evidence of these things. So, behind the scenes, when we have connected some of the volunteers in Rakhine as well, they are also going through a lot of security issues. They have taken the risk of sending evidence to us in a time when their life is at risk. If Arakan Army finds someone with a cell phone with internet, they would just be disappearing. They would just be killed. They would just be prosecuted for false allegations, and they would just be uh, put on an allegation that they are coordinating with armed groups, military, and all of this. So even having someone in possession of a cell phone means the person is doing an illegal activity there. So you can imagine how much enormous risk they have taken to send us evidence and also connect us with victim. In the meantime, one of the main four connections we had in the ground, we have lost communication with this person. And till now, like for several months now, we don't know where this person is. We believe this person may have been abducted by Arakan Army or been killed because of the evidence he was sending us for the atrocities of the Arakan Army. This report, the Ashes of Rakhine, is not just an exposure of what continues to happen in Rakhine with the Rohingyas. There are evidences of ongoing atrocities against the Rohingya people in Rakhine. This report also shows how victims of the war crimes and genocide have taken on the responsibility of documenting the crimes they are subjected to when the international community and the international framework continues to fail in providing justice. I'll briefly touch upon the report, what it says. We documented entire villages, dozens of villages that were being, burned and razed to the ground. The Buthidaung town attacks, where homes, mosques, schools, and even hospitals where sheltering displaced civilians were deliberately set ablaze by Arakan Army. Sexual violence against Rohingya women and girls, used as a calculated tool of terror, and abductions and forced conscriptions of men, boys, and as colleague from Fatifarite, John said some of them were even used as human shield in the fight. And importantly, the Hoyasuri village massacre, where over 600 people were massacred. It's an entire village, massacre of an entire village. We were able to, collect the documents with names and age group, as my colleague Sabir has mentioned. 346 Rohingyas that include children, pregnant women, and elderly people who were killed by, during this massacre. While Janta and the AA are blaming each other for these heinous crimes, these acts are not, as Brother Saiful has mentioned, they're not collateral damage of war. They are deliberate, acts to erase the Rohingyas. They made the threshold of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, whatever crimes in the international laws mentioned or not mentioned, all meets this crimes meets all this criteria. So, the Rohingya, have lived in the shadow of impunity for decades. But the Ashes of Rakhine is a cry for accountability, as others have mentioned. Along with uncovering the ongoing reality in Rakhine, this report also conveys a key message on the importance of survivors being able to voice of their own experiences, to be resources, to be empowered, to play a key role in the documentation. And the use of the ashes as a title of the Ashes of Rakhine is both literal and symbolic too. Rohingya villages lies in ashes, Rohingya families lies in ashes, but the international community and the international promises lies in ashes too. If the slogan like, never again continues to remain, if this continues, the slogan like never again continues to remain meaningless. But the law, international law is, I think, not powerless. When people have we have the convention, we have the code, we have the proceedings, what we require is a political will to help the Rohingyas get justice. If we continue to fail, the ashes will not only cover the Rohingyas, but also very credibility of the international law itself. But as Rohingyas, as Samanvita and others have mentioned, we will continue to document. As Dr. Zarni has mentioned, we will continue to document with the little resource we have, wait for a day when the international community truly realize that we deserve dignity and justice. Many thanks to everyone for giving your time during the report. For me personally, it was really difficult time with personal security and everything, and also working on this report when my entire village was burned down, when my relatives from my family members, extended family members were killed during this period, during these attacks. And it was as difficult as I was facing through for everyone else in while working on this report. Especially we mourn the loss of one of our members with whom we have lost contacts in the ground. Thanks everyone. Thanks, someone with over to you.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you. That was powerful. That was succinct, and that was what the report intended to do. But it is one thing to be a part of the drafting team, and the other, and it's of course other to live through this. It's something else entirely to live through this nature of tragedy, and yet be quote unquote objective about it, and to be able to document it. I can only imagine what you must have gone through in the process. Ali, there's a question I think you and Ria would be the best people to answer it, but anybody else can also take up on this. I think Klaus referred to it briefly. This is Mir. So Mir Abu Rayad, president and co-founder of Brave Dimension, a queer-led feminist non-profit connects the US and Bangladesh. He has they have two questions, and they're asking that I can see you have interviewed 30 people. How many of them were representative of your Rohingya community, and how did you manage to showcase their struggles focusing on gender-based violence? Ali or Ria or anybody else, but I don't think the other speakers would be very aware of this. So I think Ali and Ria, if either of you could address this question.
I think I can go ahead and address it. So when we were collecting the data for the report, it was just even getting in touch with a lot of the people was a Herculean task. It was almost impossible. And so and it was not as if these were long rambling calls for an hour. They're quick 10-15 minute calls where the person that we're speaking to is constantly scared that they would be found out for having a phone or having a sim. So, or that they would be, as we heard in the certain testimony, that if anyone finds out that you are speaking and you're giving your testimony, they come after you to kill you. So under these very oppressing circumstances, we did not ask them um, about their identity. We didn't ask them to identify themselves, just because I personally think that if they're recounting whatever they're able to off the top of their head, um, ask like interrupting to ask them about their identity or how do they identify, it's not a consideration. Your village is burning down, you're recounting stories of sexual violence, really, like. And with regards to SGBV, a lot of them spoke about the humiliation that comes with using rape as a tool of war, essentially. So if the participant is interested, I would redirect them towards the report, which in detail talks about sexual violence. But yes, I'm not so much if they'll I'm not so sure that they'll be able to find too many details about queer Rohingyas, because that simply just was not a consideration. It was just any Rohingyas that we could speak to was a mammoth task in itself. So yeah.
Thank you, Ria. Thank you. I think, yeah, it's very correct that the nature of testimonies collected were very quick and very urgent, and you did not create much space. That's very true. I think we are way beyond time at this point, and so I'll quickly just summarize it in 2-3 sentences, and I think then we can call it an end. So, as the situation stands today, I think. Despite going through massive scales of violence, almost similar to the 2017 genocide and even before that, the world seems to have forgotten about the plight of the Rohingya refugees, and the accountability mechanism seems to be failing them, not just locally or regionally, but also globally. People continue to suffer in Rakhine. They are living in prison-like conditions. There's no food, education. Um, Forget about education. There's no food, medicine, no way to get the information out. Things have only gotten worse. Beyond the junta, there's now the Arakan Army, which continues to wreak havoc on the communities. There are villages which are being razed like the 2017 genocide, and it is necessary that the world um, tries to hold the perpetrators accountable and tries to bring the survivors their justice, their due justice. Having said that, it is again not looking upward in any way for the people who are already in protracted displacement situations. Humanitarian aid is in an extremely dire state. Donor states are there have been massive fund cuts. Donor states are unwilling to extend humanitarian aid to communities which live in very dire situations in camps in Bangladesh. There are other regional states which are also becoming extremely volatile and constantly vilifying the community, and therefore there is a general public apathy towards the community. People seem to have forgotten that these are victims of massive violence and genocide. And I think, like Ali said, that it's the ashes that everybody, like the not just the community but also everything seems to be covered in ashes, that there's nothing that seems to be looking upward at this point in time. But again, I don't want to end it on a negative note, and I think, as Saifullah said, that may this be the last time that we are bringing out reports of this sort. And I think I hope that things become a little better for the community at large. I think I'll end with that. Sabirji, do you want to add anything? This you can go ahead.
थैंक यू सोनविता जी, रिया जी। ये रिपोर्ट तो हमने रिलीज़ किया है। हम लोग जितने ऑडियंस, जितने स्पीकर, INGOs ज्वाइन हुए हैं, सबको हम अपील कर रहे हैं इस इश्यूज़ को लेके इंटरनेशनल फोरम में एडवोकेसी करें। और ये अभी सितंबर में UN हाई लेवल कॉन्फ्रेंस है, वहाँ पर भी पब्लिक डोमेन में ये अवेलेबल इंफॉर्मेशन होंगे। और रखाइन स्टेट में दिन ब दिन सिचुएशन ख़राब है, और इसलिए वहाँ पे कम से कम ह्यूमैनिटेरियन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन रखाइन में लोगों को भूखमरी जो हो रहा है वहाँ पे ह्यूमैनिटेरियन एड दे, मेडिकल एड दे। कम से कम लोगों को वहाँ पे जो बचा हुआ है उनको खाना मिल जाए, और उसके ऊपर बात करें। और थैंक यू। और आप सोनविता जी, रिया जी, आप दोनों के बिना ये इनकम्प्लीट होते रिपोर्ट। कोई भी अब तक हम लोगों ने जितना इवेंट्स किया है या कॉन्फ्रेंस किया है, जो भी किया है, तो आप लोगों के बिना अधूरा रहता है रिपोर्ट।
Thank you, Sabirji. Ria, would you translate that call for the INGOs in that?
Sorry?
I'm saying, Ria, would you translate that like Sabirji says that INGOs need to like sort of advocate for it. Could you just translate that bit and then we
The thing he just said now.
yeah.
Okay, he basically said that it's very important now, echoing the sentiments you've already shared, that it's very important now for all of us to continue talking about it, so that even if it feels like it's a lost cause, whatever people are left there and who don't have access to food, and who are going hungry, very similar to what we're seeing in Palestine, even if right now it feels like a lost cause, our advocacy can still maybe help reach a lot of resources to them. And it is not a lost cause. There are still people who are in need of help. So we have to continue speaking about it.
Thank you, Ria. I think we can end the session. Thank you so much to our esteemed speakers, our audience, some of whom I see, and also my supervisor who's who's made time to sort of join this session, but also a lot of family members that I see that I have sort of asked them to join the session. I think it's important that we keep building a community of people who are sort of aware and more interested in the cause. But beyond that, I think special acknowledgement needs to be made to APRRN and Amrita for the technical support, and for extending the Zoom access to us. Special thanks need to be made to R4R, the research, the field monitoring team, the editorial team, which also includes Fortified Rights and Natalie Brinham, who very generously edited our reports, and also the donor acknowledgement. So we are being very conscious. We are not naming individuals because there might be a genuine threat involved. So I think at this point, we are just naming organizations largely. And with that, I think we can end the webinar. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. And good evening.
जी, मुझे एक चीज़ पॉइंट ऐड करना है। इस रिपोर्ट शुरू से लेके अंत तक 2 लोगों का बहुत क्रेडिट जाता है, तपन सर और रवि सर। जब ये इशू शुरू हुआ था, ये रिपोर्ट बनाने के लिए मुझे इन लोगों ने आइडियाज दिया, एडवाइस दिया, रिपोर्ट भी रेडी हुआ, ये दोनों भी ख़त्म हो गया। तो मैं इमोशनल हो जाता हूँ, इसलिए इसमें ये बात नहीं बोल पाया। और रिपोर्ट के लिए आने वाला रिपोर्ट में सर के बारे में, तपन सर के बारे में, रवि सर के बारे में लिखकर रहेंगे। और मैं स्पेशली आप दोनों को, रिया जी को, सौनिता जी को थैंक यू करूँगा। आप लोग नहीं होते ये रिपोर्ट नहीं कंप्लीट कर पाता। बाकी और टीम सब लोगों ने मेहनत की है। और दूसरा नेताली, 45 राइट, सब लोगों ने मदद किया इसमें रिपोर्ट में। और आज जो है 45 राइट से ह्यूमन राइट्स वॉच से मीनाक्षी जी, जॉन, डॉक्टर ब्रदर जानी और ब्रदर सैफुल, और जितना हमारा स्पीकर आए हैं सबको थैंक यू। और टाइमली हम लोगों ने ख़त्म भी किया, और आप लोगों ने जो टाइम दिया है और इसके लिए हम शुक्रगुजार हैं। आगे के लिए इस तरह की चीज़ें होंगे, आप लोगों को हम दोबारा इस तरह की चीज़ें में इन्वाइट करूँगा। थैंक यू। Ali?
Yeah, I think we can end the meeting here. That's
Ali?
Yes.
কিছু এবার তাহলে হয় না মাঝে।
No, মানুষ নেই লিজার কে ফারিব continue